Hey, everyone, and welcome to another deep dive.
Yeah.
This time it's going to be a juicy one. We're looking at the lawsuit that the New York Times filed against Microsoft and OpenAI.
Oh, yeah. This is a big one.
Yeah, in December 2023, they filed this thing, and it's really fascinating because it's all about how OpenAI used millions of articles from the New York Times to train their AI models.
Mm,
You know, the ones we all use and talk about, ChatGPT and Bing Chat.
right.
So we're going right to the source, the actual complaint, and we're going to unpack it all for you. And what's really interesting is that it's not just a legal battle. It gets you thinking about, like, what even is the value of journalism in the age of AI?
Absolutely. And, one of the things that really struck me reading this complaint is how much emphasis the New York Times puts on, their history, their journalistic standards right from the very beginning.
Oh, yeah, like page one stuff.
Yeah, they spend a good chunk of it just laying out, their role in a democratic society, how rigorous their fact-checking process is. So they even mention that they've been around since 1851.
It's like they're saying, hey, we've been doing this for a while. We're not just some random website.
Right, exactly.
But why is that so important in this case? Like, is it just bragging rights?
I don't think so. I think they're laying the groundwork for a much bigger argument. Because think about it, we're living in this age of information overload where anyone can publish anything online. Misinformation spreads like wildfire.
Oh, yeah.
So the Times is basically saying in this kind of environment, reliable sources, fact-checked sources become even more important than ever.
Right.
And they're saying that's what makes them such a valuable target for companies like OpenAI.
Okay, so they're establishing their credibility, but then they get into this very close relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI. Microsoft invested billions in OpenAI. It's almost like they're partners.
Yeah, it's a very cozy relationship.
So what's the significance of that connection to the lawsuit?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting because the complaint highlights that Microsoft isn't just a financial backer. They're providing the actual infrastructure, the muscle for all of this AI stuff to happen.
Right, the computing power.
Right, we're talking massive computing power, the supercomputers that you need to train these AI models. Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft, even said they had to completely rethink even the data center for this whole collaboration.
Wow, that's crazy. So it gives you a sense of the scale of what we're talking about here, but let's get to the heart of the matter, the actual data. The Times alleges that OpenAI used millions of their articles without permission to train these AI models. And this isn't just any content. This is like Pulitzer Prize-winning journalism.
Exactly, high quality stuff.
So why does that matter so much?
Well, to understand that, you got to understand a little bit about how these large language models or LLMs actually work. They're trained on massive data sets of text and code, and they learn by identifying patterns and relationships in the data.
So it's like teaching a kid how to write by having them read like a ton of books.
Yeah, exactly. And the complaint points to a specific data set called web text that OpenAI used in some of their earlier models, and they claim that Times content makes up a significant chunk of that data set, especially, like you said, the high-quality stuff.
It's like they're saying, hey, our content isn't just some random drop in the bucket. This is the gourmet meal that made your AI so sophisticated.
Precisely.
So this is where the concept of fair use comes in, right?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming the Times doesn't think OpenAI's use falls under fair use.
Right. And this gets really tricky in the world of AI because the Times isn't saying AI can never use copyrighted material. That there are established legal exceptions for things like criticism, commentary, news reporting.
Right, yeah.
But they're arguing that OpenAI's actions go way beyond, that they're using this content to create commercial products that are directly competing with the Times.
So it's about more than just using the content. It's about the purpose of the use and the potential harm it could cause. And I bet some people would push back on that and say, well, couldn't OpenAI argue that they're transforming the content into something new? I mean, the AI isn't just spitting out identical copies of Times articles. It's creating unique responses based on what it's learned.
That's a great point, and it's one of the things the Times really pushes back against in the complaint because they're basically saying even if the output looks different, the AI's ability to generate that output is fundamentally based on the original content it ingested.
Okay, so it's like the foundation of the AI is built on this copyrighted material.
Exactly. And they actually give some pretty striking examples in the complaint showing the AI reproducing Times content word for word.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there's one example involving this 2019 expose about these predatory taxi medallion lending practices, really impactful investigative journalism. And the AI seemingly just like regurgitated huge chunks of it.
Wow. So it's not just theoretical. They have concrete evidence of the AI mirroring their work.
Right. And this brings up a whole other question about plagiarism, which we'll get into. But first, let's look at how the Times builds its case for economic harm. Because that's a big part of this lawsuit, right? It's not just about principle, it's about money.
Right. So how do they actually show that they've been harmed financially?
Well, that's where things get even more interesting, and we'll dive into that in part 2 of our deep dive. You're right, it is about the money. The Times argues that OpenAI and Microsoft are basically profiting off of their hard work,
Yeah.
all the journalism they've produced.
So how do they make that case? I mean, it can't be as simple as just like, hey, you used our stuff, now pay up.
Of course not. It gets pretty nuanced, and they dive deep into the legal arguments around copyright law, specifically focusing on how OpenAI's use of their content goes beyond what's considered fair use.
But we touched on that earlier, the exceptions for things like criticism and news reporting.
Exactly. And, it's interesting how they counter OpenAI's argument that their use is transformative, because OpenAI says they're creating something entirely new and different with their models. But the Times points to those examples where the AI spits out their content word for word.
Like we talked about earlier.
Exactly. They're basically saying, hold on, if it's verbatim, where's the transformation?
Right. It's like taking a recipe from a cookbook and claiming you invented it.
Exactly. And, remember all those billions that Microsoft poured into OpenAI?
Yeah.
Well, the Times uses that to really hammer home the point that this isn't just some academic exercise. OpenAI and Microsoft are creating commercial products that directly compete for eyeballs and advertising dollars.
Right. So they're potentially taking readers and revenue away from the Times.
Exactly. They call it free writing, basically. OpenAI is benefiting from the Times' journalistic investments without, contributing to the costs.
So the Times is saying they built this reputation, they have a loyal subscriber base, and OpenAI is just coming along and reaping the benefits.
Exactly. And it's interesting they actually detail their efforts to strike licensing deals with other tech companies.
Oh, they have?
Yeah, they've successfully worked with Google, Meta, and Apple in the past, so they're not opposed to technology or AI. They're saying, hey, we're willing to play ball, but you got to play fair.
So it's not like they're Luddites trying to smash the machines.
No, not at all. And this highlights an important point. In the complaint, they actually reached out to both Microsoft and OpenAI to try and negotiate, but they were ignored.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they're painting a picture of OpenAI and Microsoft deliberately choosing to exploit their content without permission, prioritizing profit over partnership.
And I'm sure some people will hear this and say, come on, the Times, isn't this a bit dramatic? It's just a few articles. But they actually lay out very specific ways they believe they've been harmed, right?
Oh, absolutely. They get very granular talking about potential losses in subscription revenue because, people might turn to AI summaries instead of paying for journalism.
Right.
And they even talk about the potential damage to their reputation, especially with those AI hallucinations we talked about earlier.
Yeah, if the AI starts attributing false information to the Times, that could really erode people's trust in their reporting.
Exactly. And you know what else they talk about? Wirecutter.
Oh, yeah. The Times owns Wirecutter, right?
That's right, the product review site, and the complaint shows how the AI can reproduce Wirecutter recommendations almost word for word.
So, like, if I'm trying to decide on a new laptop and I ask the AI, it might just give me the Wirecutter recommendation without sending me to their site.
Exactly, and that means no affiliate revenue for Wirecutter. Their business model starts to crumble.
Wow. It really shows how these things can have ripple effects.
Yeah.
And this is where the legal arguments get even more interesting because the Times isn't just claiming copyright infringement. They're bringing up unfair competition, misappropriation of their work, even trademark dilution.
It's like they brought the whole legal arsenal.
Yeah, they're not messing around. And that's a really significant part of this case because the Times isn't just fighting for themselves. They're trying to set a precedent for the whole media industry. They want to make it clear that news organizations have a right to control how their content is used in this new age of AI.
Absolutely.
And the remedies they're seeking are pretty serious. They're asking for statutory damages, destruction of the infringing AI models, even a permanent injunction to stop OpenAI and Microsoft from using their content.
Yeah, it's a bold move, and it speaks to how seriously they're taking this threat. If the Times wins, it could have huge implications for how AI companies interact with copyrighted material.
Like every news organization, every author, every blogger could start filing similar lawsuits.
It would completely change the landscape.
Wow, but it's not over yet, right?
Yeah.
We still have to talk about the Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
That's right, the DMCA. That's where things get even more legally intricate, and the Times uses it to really drive home their point about intent.
So let's break that down in part 3 of our deep dive. Okay, so we're back, and it's time to unpack this Digital Millennium Copyright Act angle. This feels like the legal equivalent of, bringing in the big guns.
You could say that the DMCA, it's been around since 1998, and it's all about protecting copyrighted works in the digital world. Originally it was designed to combat things like online piracy, but the Times is using a very specific part of it to target OpenAI and Microsoft.
So what's this secret weapon they're wielding?
Well, it all comes down to something called copyright management information, or CMI. Basically, it's any data that helps identify a copyrighted work. Things like the copyright notice, the author's name, the title, even those like weird identifying numbers or symbols you sometimes see.
Right, right.
And the DMCA makes it illegal to remove or alter that information without the copyright owner's permission.
Okay, I see where this is going. So is the Times saying that OpenAI scrubbed this information from their articles?
Exactly. They're alleging that when OpenAI scraped all that data from the web to create these massive data sets, they stripped away the very information that would have identified the Times as the owner.
So it's like wiping off the fingerprints at a crime scene.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
But why is that such a big deal?
Well, imagine trying to solve a puzzle where all the pieces are blank.
Yeah.
That's kind of what the Times is arguing OpenAI did by removing the CMI. It becomes super difficult to trace back where the information came from and prove that OpenAI knowingly used copyrighted material.
So it's not just an oversight. The Times is saying they did this on purpose.
Right. They believe OpenAI intentionally removed the CMI to avoid having to pay for the content.
And this all ties back to their earlier points about unfair competition, right? It's like they're saying not only are you using our stuff without permission, but you're actively trying to hide the fact that you're doing it.
Exactly. The Times is arguing that this whole scheme, was designed to benefit OpenAI and Microsoft at their expense. They're using their high-quality content to build these products that compete with them, and at the same time, they're making it harder for the Times to, assert their ownership or receive fair compensation.
This whole case is like a legal thriller, and it could really change the rules of the game for AI and copyright.
Absolutely. It raises fundamental questions about, how we value and protect creative work in a world where machines can just, seemingly generate original content.
So what are the big takeaways here for our listeners?
Well, I think this case highlights how much we're in uncharted territory right now. We've got these rapid technological advancements colliding with our existing legal frameworks. And this case could really reshape how we think about copyright in the digital age. It also raises questions about, the ethics of using someone else's work to train AI if a machine can create something that seems original, but it's based on the efforts of human creators. How do we make sure those creators are compensated and recognized?
It's a lot to think about. And as AI becomes even more intertwined with our lives, these questions are just going to get more and more important.
One final thought for, as you go about your day, pay attention to the information you're encountering online. Is it from a trusted source? Has it been properly attributed? The lines are getting blurry, and it's more important than ever to be, discerning consumers of information.
That's such great advice. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. And remember, stay curious, keep asking questions, and let's all navigate this crazy new world together.